Oh dear, we can't hear you, Brooke.
Wait, now can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So sorry. I have two mute buttons. My bad.
Go ahead. We can.
Thank you. Hello, all. The good news is I'm speaker 123 and we only have 29 or less to go. My name is Brooke Cheney and I'm from Harwington, Connecticut. I'm a firearms instructor, a mom, assistant director of the DC project, and a victim of violent crime. I'm here today to voice my opinion against Section 7 of Bill 477 and Bill number 5397. I am truly saddened by people's choice to focus only on gun violence versus the violence that occurs long before someone picks up a gun. Guns do nothing. They are pieces of metal. People cause violence. Per my written testimony, 76% of violent crime in Connecticut is without a gun, according to our uniform crime report. Why would we look only at 24% of violent crime? A mother who loses her child to an errant bullet suffers no less than a mother who loses her child from a gang beating. My distress and opposition over this bill is that it doesn't do enough and is too myopic. Throughout the day, people have said this should be a no-brainer. It could be a no-brainer if we took the word gun out of the bill. It could be a no-brainer if you actually included someone like me, a gun owner and educator, in the conversation versus excluding us. If you wanted this bill to go through without any resistance, all you need to do is focus on violence as a whole. The obsession with guns versus violence keeps us away from addressing the root cause of violence. The gun community is the most giving and have some of the biggest hearts you will ever find. We are heavily involved in safety training, veteran suicide prevention programs, and many community-based programs. Imagine what could happen if we were able to work together, two passionate groups working for the same cause, violence prevention. Over the last decade, I have studied what truly helps prevent violence. It is community-based. It's that simple and that complex. As Representative Zupkis mentioned, is there a possibility to simply change the scope of the existing Gun Violence Advisory Board that was created in 2014 versus create a whole new one? Perhaps that money could get to the actual programs that are in need right now. I feel, listening to Senator Moore in her heart today, that she has an amazing handle on what programs are available that are waiting for funding. We have talked about a need for a holistic approach. I support that 100%. That would be including gun owners, not just people who see guns as killing machines. Violence is a problem and needs to be addressed. As long as you focus on the smallest portion, you're going to get the smallest return on your investment. Please consider losing the gun specification in this bill and help people who are at risk of violence now. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. I do see a couple of hands. First, Representative Pettit.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mrs. Cheney. So you would suggest that, number one, a title change, but secondly, focus on overall violence. How would you structure that? Would you consider the same sort of task force or working group to look at causes of violence?
So there is tons of data out there already. As people have said, it is disparate and it's all over the place and it's easy to get lost in the data. As far as violence prevention, I think much of what has been said today is absolutely on point as far as it needs to be community centric and it needs to have a way to be measured as far as effectiveness. The challenge is figuring out when stuff doesn't happen is a much harder metric for anyone to figure out. So the FBI Gang Violence Task Force, for example, they've come up with a basic outline of how to prevent gang violence, but they constantly talk about how what works in LA is not the same thing that works in Houston or Chicago. And so having a centralized point of contact within Connecticut makes sense for what works in Hartford may not work the same in Bridgeport or New Haven. And so yes, we absolutely 100% are for preventing violence, but as has been discussed today, it's about looking at the root causes. It's like making sure kids have those after school programs, making sure that someone can go home and has a meal. The community-based thing is the actual full center of violence prevention across all reports that I've ever looked at over the past decade. So I'm for a lot of the things that people are talking about. I'm just tired as a gun owner being vilified because how dare I want to have a firearm? And I just wish that we could look at violence prevention instead of saying that the gun is the cause of the violence, is what it feels like as a gun owner when we come before the committees time and time again.
I appreciate that response, and thank you for sticking with us for 13 plus hours to give your testimony. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I will recognize Senator Moore.
Thank you, Ms. Cheney, for your comments. I agree. You know, I'm not fighting a gun here. I'm fighting the people who, for whatever reason, are using guns to do violence. And I would be willing, and I heard Representative Pitt mention this to you, what is the answer to the violence? If you wanted to do a work group and start addressing that as a bigger issue, because we're all impacted by that in every community, that is a problem, the violence, some form. If I believe there was a way to focus on an issue that big, I would tackle it. But for now, I think the issue that I'm really concerned is what I see in the communities in Connecticut that are being hit hard by not legal gun owners, not people who hunt. You know, it just came back to me when someone was talking about their father was a hunter. My father had a hunter and had a pack of dogs, hounds that they kept, and they would go hunting when I was a kid, right? That's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about these kids are using, instead of, you know, when I was a kid, you got mad with somebody, you put up your dukes, you know, and you fought it out with your fist. Your mom and dad broke it up, or your friends, and you got in trouble. That's not what's happening anymore. I don't know why it's shifted from using your hands and words and why it's turned into guns. But I know that we have to get to the root cause of what's happening. And I believe the data collection is going to be really important. But I also believe we've got to fund these programs that are doing good work. They've been on here all day long talking about the work they're doing. Collectively, they're doing good work. Some of them are underfunded. Some of them just ask for donations all the time where they could be doing a better job. I'm hoping that this commission will look at this more holistic approach all over the state and say what works and what doesn't. Because you're right. When you say what works in Hartford may not work in Bridgeport, you're right. And what works in New Haven may not work in Waterbury. But we won't know until we have a concentrated effort on trying to address that. And it is my hope that this commission would do that. So I agree with you in many places. And if you want to reach out to me and say, you know, let's do a work group on violence, I would be there for you.
Well, thank you, Senator Moore. It's been wonderful listening to you throughout the day. And, you know, I don't know you, I've never got to meet you yet, but I hope that that's something we can do in the future. And I just have to say, on a personal note, for me, it's like the death toll in 2020 of 157 deaths in Connecticut is a problem, absolutely. But there were 359 who died by suicide. And we're talking about so many things that are happening all at the same time. And it's really amazing how large the problem is. But at the same time, it really does come down to human basic needs. And
I don't know if you know this, but we've worked on suicide, and the Children's Committee has really good bills in the mental health on suicide also. And the number that you mentioned, 150 by gun, that's the number of deaths. That's not the number of people who've been shot.
right.
That
No,
does a lot of
absolutely.
damage, right? So we want
Yeah.
to consider that also.
Right. No, and the 359 were actual suicide deaths. And so for me, I focus on the larger number that we have. Like I said, I'm disappointed in the fact that when people talk about gun violence, it's a small percentage of the actual violence. And for me personally, especially as a gun owner, it's like, I would love to see us focus purely on the larger numbers, the suicide prevention stuff that needs to get done. As we've discussed part of today, the veterans that are dying, 22, nationally, over 130 people are dead today. They have died by suicide. And as much as gun violence is something that is a problem, we have bigger problems. And it's just like, I want to start at the beginning. It's like before they get to picking up a gun. And it's just, I mean, I know we all want to save the world, but eventually we'll figure it out.
You know, for me, it doesn't matter if it's 157 or 350, it's a life, and each life is valuable. And no one knows what that person who died, for whatever reasons, by no fault of their own, they died, and you don't know what contribution they would have made. But also the collateral damage on, on how that results in trauma in families. I listened to a woman the other day tell me her story about her son was killed 20 some years ago, right? And she still feels the pain of that. That's not something you can put a number on. That's not something you can measure. But I think I bring hope to people when I talk about I'm willing with that, as I am willing to deal with anything that creates harm in our community. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate your comments.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Senator
Madam
Moore.
Chair.
And in my written testimony, one of the things I talk about is in SB 5397, how they talk about the mental health care for victims of gun violence. And one of my objections was the fact, well, what about those of us like me who are victims of sexual violence? Because just like the story you just told me, I was gang raped. And when I was like 13, 14 years old, and just 10 years ago, I was in a diner with my family, and one of the men who had done that to me as a child walked in and looked at me, and he smiled. I had no idea the effect of something that had happened so long ago would leave such a lasting scar. And this is why I wish we could actually expand the scope to take care of as many as possible that are victims of violence, and not just being myopic on gun violence. But I thank you for your time this evening. I'm sorry, we still have 28 more people to go.
It's a big elephant. We're just taking one bite out at a time to get rid of this, okay? We're here, but thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Ms. Cheney, sharing your personal story like you just did is really important for all of us. And I'm sure it was hard for you to say that, but it does bring perspective to the issues that you raise about the depth of violence and how it's impacted people's lives. And I really appreciate you sharing that. I do see that we have another person who wants to ask you a question or make a comment. Representative Claritas Detria.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Brooke, for your compelling testimony. I was reading through it, and it's some really, it's amazing things. One of the things you said in your testimony is stop wasting time and money creating new programs and offices when we have existing programs with proven records of success. Do you have any specific programs in mind that you think have been very successful?
I believe that all the community-based programs that are currently out there, as far as I know, are exactly what we need. And like Senator Moore has mentioned throughout the day, I mean, they just need more funding. It's been proven time and time again is community-based, the people who are in the situations that are dealing with the situations who need the help and the support. So I don't know the name of the group, but earlier on this morning when they were talking about the Connecticut hospital group that was working, I think it was Bridgeport and Hartford, and they were working with other community-based groups. It's like something like that already exists. That's absolutely what we should be just funding. It's like, why create something to find out that we need to fund something like that? So,
and I think one of the other things we often do here in Hartford is we need to get rid of the programs that aren't working. Don't fund them anymore. Put the money towards what's working. And if it's not working, get rid of it and figure out what's working. But I also liked your PS at the end of your testimony. As long as we focus on a weapon of choice versus the casualty of violence, we will get nowhere, which I think just sums up everything. And I thank you again for everything. And we'll be listening to you and waiting for you. And we will continue working on this together. And hopefully you'll be part of the solution. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Brooke, I don't see any more hands.
Oh, yeah, apparently.
I couldn't see your hand in the background.
She's
blurry. Representative Zupkus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It does blend in. That's amazing. Hi, Brooke. Thank you for coming and sharing your story tonight. I agree with you 100%. And, you know, you made me think about this is because I had said earlier, this is really violence, what we're talking about, and gun violence is part of it. But I remember in Hartford, somebody ran over a man and they left him in the middle of the street. Like people didn't even stop and kept walking by. And this had nothing to do with a gun. And there are so many incidents of violence that happens in the cities everywhere, but especially in the cities that don't even have anything to do with guns. And I think as legislators, it's our responsibility to look at all, and now's the opportunity. Let's take it and look at all of that violence and see how we can move forward and get to the root of it and peel back that onion, and look at it as a whole versus one specific thing. So thank you for reiterating that and bringing it up.
You're welcome. And I just have to let you all know is, since I shared a horrible story, I grew up as a tree hugger. In that, literally, my family, we'd go out in the woods, hug the tree before we cut it down for firewood for the winter. And we would thank it for the wonderful wood that it was giving to us, that we were knowing that we were cutting a tree down, taking a life of a tree, but we were thankful for that tree for giving us warmth throughout the winter. And from there, it's like the flies in my house get caught and released. Just because I have a gun has nothing to do with violence. It's who I am. I believe all life is precious. It always has been precious. And the more, and someone else had said this, is like the more we focus on life being precious and the value of life, and every life matters, as Senator Moore had just said, it's like every life matters. It doesn't matter what color skin you have. It doesn't matter what neighborhood you are in. Violence is a horrible thing, and all types of violence leave scars, whether you can see them or not. So again, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your time and have a lovely rest of your evening.
Thank you, Ms. Cheney. And now I really don't see any other hands unless somebody else has a blurry background and I didn't see it. So I apologize, Representative Zupkis, but I don't see any other hands at this time. So we will move to the next speaker on our list. That is Holly Sullivan.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me? Very good.
Yes, we can.
Great. Dear Co-Chair Doherty Abrams, Co-Chair Steinberg, Vice Chair Anwar, Vice Chair Kushner, Vice Chair Gilchrist, Ranking Member Huang, Ranking Member Somers, Ranking Member Pettit, and other distinguished members of the Public Health Committee. Thank you all for being here so late in the evening. I appreciate everybody's time. My name is Holly Sullivan, and I am the president of the Connecticut Citizens Defense League. We are a nonpartisan grassroots organization with over 43,000 members devoted to advocating for the rights affirmed by the Constitution of the United States of America, as well as the state of Connecticut. We are dedicated that these are individuals who own or have access to firearms. Our members are not immune to the loss and heartache of losing a loved one to violence of any nature, including suicide. Going off script, I will share with you that I've lost two people to suicide since I've lived in the state of Connecticut. One was due to a firearm and one was a hanging. So we are not immune to this. We are very much as involved in this as anybody else is in any other cross section of our state. However, I would like to point out that Connecticut's 2020 suicide rate is one of the lowest in the nation per the CDC. Our rates are lower than 44 other states, including California, Illinois, Colorado, and Virginia. I would encourage you to explore an approach taken by the legislature of the state of Washington, which established the Safer Homes Coalition. The Safer Homes Coalition is comprised of firearms retailers, healthcare providers, suicide prevention experts, as well as Second Amendment rights groups. Members further include law enforcement and veteran services. This cohesive approach reassures a balanced effort that truly focuses on the outcome of suicide prevention. And I'd like to quote Safer Homes co-chair Alan Gottlieb's 2016 press release, in which he wrote, "Suicide prevention is not and should never be about gun control, but about saving lives and preventing tragedies. People working together have a far greater chance of accomplishing something than working against one another." The Connecticut Citizens Defense League asks this committee to vote no on HB 5397 and SB 477. HB 5397 will create an unbalanced advisory council, which is disconnected from the very people who own and have access to firearms, no doubt leading to distrust and inefficacy. As the state of Washington realized, gun owners cannot be dismissed from the discussion on gun safety and suicide prevention. Gun owners must be adequately consulted and represented if there is going to be a genuine discussion on reducing deaths in our state, which was not the case in proposed bill HB 5397. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify, and I'll take any questions you may have.
I don't see any hands, so we will move to the next speaker.